This is Brian Foster, and today I am presenting A Wanderer in the Spirit Land, Chapter 9, The Frozen Land. Now, we have been going through chapters 1 through 8 in this book by the Spirit Franchezzo, transcribed by the medium A. Farnese. This was published, I think, around 1896, more than 120 years ago. So, this is very interesting. It has a lot of parallels to Spiritism. This is why I love these books, because I take what Spiritism has told us. Spiritism was brought to us by Allan Kardec in the 1850s. And it was codified by Allan Kardec, but it was not brought to us, I should say, because it was arranged by the Spirit of Truth, as promised in the New Testament. Jesus said, I will send you more information, the great consoler, the Spirit of Truth. And so a whole group of high spirits came and answered Kardec's 1,096 questions. And so, therefore, all these questions got answered, and it was very interesting. And it told us a lot about the spirit realm. And since then, Allan Kardec published more books from information from the spirit world, Gospel According to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, Genesis, and one other book, and I can't remember what it was, but there were 5 books in total. Then they had mediums like Leon Denis, who wrote books afterwards, and then we had the great medium Chico, Francisco, nicknamed Chico Xavier, who wrote, well, he wrote 450 during his lifetime, but it's actually more than almost 500 books have been published from other writings and other messages he sent. So there's been a lot of information from the spirit world from spiritists, via spiritist mediums, from spirits who represent Jesus Christ, our leader in the spirit realm, who's the governor, you could say the governor of our planet and other planets besides, but really he is the one who shepherded the whole creation of the earth, the creation, the formation, the evolution of the human race, our cultures, our destinies, our nations, everything about us have all been guided by Jesus. And guided to what? Guided for us to come from immature spirits to mature spirits, at least more mature spirits, like a child in school. They go through school, they go through class after class, we go through life after life. Hopefully they improve. So this book, of course, is written by a spirit who experienced the spirit land on his own. And he doesn't mention the word spiritism, but what he says, I interpret by spiritism. What he says is just, again, one more point of fact to bolster what spiritism have told us via other mediums. And actually, I think I said 1,096. I was thinking binary. I think it's like 1,019. I'll look that up and make sure that's correct. Questions by Allan Kardec he posed to spirits. So I will start with, before I begin, please subscribe, hit the like button. It's very important to the algorithm. It helps get more people into Spiritism. Please comment on here so I can know what you like and other questions and things maybe for the future. So hit the like, hit the subscribe, and hit the bell. Now let's start with what we're working on now. So let me hide this one. And on this, there you go. So you can see it. I'll make sure it stays up above so we can read along. I can't do that on what I'm talking about on Sundays, because that is a Kindle book that I'm kind of talking about and interpreting. But this is in the public domain, and I can put this up and we can read it together, and I can discuss it. So let's start. The Frozen Land, the Caverns of Slumber. I was next sent to visit what will indeed seem a strange country to exist in the spirit world. The land of ice and snow, the frozen land, in which lived all those who have been cold and selfishly calculating in their earthly lives, those who had crushed out and chilled and frozen from their own lives and the lives of others, all those warm, sweet impulses and affections which make the life of heart and soul. Love had been so crushed and killed by them that its sun could not shine where they were, and only the frost of life remained. Now, here's another kind of subsection. The lowlands. I believe he's not in the dark abyss, I should say, which is below the crust, also called purgatory. Some people call it hell, but there's no eternal punishment. This is probably in the lower zone, and so there's all sorts of different areas in the lower zone and in the dark abyss. Different cities, different sceneries. Of course, the vegetation as you go lower and lower becomes more sparse and dead. There's no leaves down in the dark abyss. There's just like thorny trees. There's no children, of course, anywhere in there. There's people that may appear to be children, but that's because they appear to be. There are no children. And these people live there because that's where the law of affinity placed them. And again, now he's talking about those who had crushed out and children frozen from their own lives. So the law of affinity placed these people who were just remain like cold people, right? We've all known people like that. They just never seemed to love anyone, maybe love themselves, but it was just like they were always first and everyone else was just to be used. So therefore, in the infinite wisdom of Christ and God, these people conjugate together and they create their own little sub-environment. And they will be there as long as they don't change their character or their feelings, which is the genius of this, of the course, of the spirit world, is it's like the opposite of the golden rule. You are done unto others what you did unto them. Others do unto you what you did unto them, I should say. So it's hard for me to reverse it because it's not nice, but it's that's what happens. So they're going to be amongst themselves. They're going to be cold to each other, sarcastic to each other. You see that all the time. So let me continue on. Great statesmen were among those whom I saw dwelling in this land, but they were those who had not loved their country nor sought its good, only their own ambitions. Their own aggrandizement had been their aim, and to me they now appeared to dwell in great palaces of ice and on the lofty frozen pinnacles of their own ambitions. Others more humble and in different paths in life I saw, but all alike were chilled and frozen by the awful coldness and barrenness of a life from which all warmth, all passion was shut out. I learned the evils of an excess of emotion and of passion. Now I saw the evils of their entire absence. Thank God this land had far fewer inhabitants than the other, for terrible are the effects of misused love. They're not so hard to overcome as the absence of all tender feelings of the human heart. So this is why Franchezzo is a great writer. He probably Camilo Branco, when Yvonne Pierre was the medium, who was just the best spirit writer I have ever read. You should read the Memoirs of a Suicide. Just wonderful. But this is really written well. And he makes a great point. You can be too passionate, too emotional, right? And that can be kind of modified, but to have nothing, right? To have nothing is harder probably to correct, because you're not you're not throttling down a little bit. It's like there's no power to go through your heart, right? There's no emotion or feeling. So it just shows you that what we need to be when we want to become perfect spirits and we want to improve ourselves, we want that balance of emotion and passion, but with logic and wisdom and love. And sometimes we do have to be a bit standoffish given the circumstances of what's best for that person we're trying to help. Maybe we can't be too emotionally involved. We have to help them. Maybe a little bit tough love in the short run for the long run for them to be better. So there's some of that, but this is an absence of any passion. Okay. There were men who had been prominent members of every religious faith and every nationality on your earth. Roman Catholic cardinals and priests of austere and pious but cold and selfish lives. Puritan preachers, Methodist ministers, Presbyterian divines, Church of England bishops and clergymen, missionaries, Brahmin priests, Farsis, Egyptians, Mohammedans. In short, all sorts and all nationalities were to be found in the frozen land. Yet, in scarcely one was there enough warmth of feeling to thaw the ice around themselves, even in a small degree. When there was even a little tiny drop of warmth, such as one tear of sorrow, then the ice began to melt, and there was hope for that poor soul. There was one man whom I saw who appeared to be enclosed in a cage of ice. The bars were of ice, yet they were bars of polished steel for strength. This man had been one of the grand inquisitors of the Inquisition in Venice, and had been one of those whose very names sent terror to the heart of any unfortunate who fell into their clutches. A most celebrated name in history, yet in all the records of his life and acts, there was not one instance where one shade of pity for his victims had touched his heart and caused him to turn aside, even for one brief moment, from his awful determination in torturing and killing those whom the Inquisition got into its toils. A man known for his own hard, austere life that had no more indulgence for himself than for others. Cold and pitiless, he knew not what it was to feel one's answering throb awake in his heart for another's suffering. His face was a type of cold, unemotional cruelty. The long, thin, high nose, the pointed, sharp chin, the high and rather wide cheekbones, the thin, straight, cruel lips like a thin line across the face, the head somewhat flat and wide over the ears, where the deep-set, penetrating eyes glittered from their penthouse brows with the cold, steely glitter of a wild beast. So this is a person that we've seen throughout history. The Inquisition was just one range, right? And this Inquisition lasted quite a long time, but in 1896, when he saw him, or when he wrote about it, it had been gone for 100, more than 100 or so years. So this person must not have changed at all. But when he says, there's no pity for his victims. I mean, that sounds just like what happened in the 20th century with communism, with Stalin killing, millions of peasants, sending millions of people to the gulags, the fascists killing millions of people in wars, the Chinese communists starving millions of peasants for whatever, cruelty they had. In Castro's Cuba with Che Guevara, who just, shot people who he thought were dangerous to the regime. North Korea, all those people, this is where a lot of them may end up, where they just, unemotionally got rid of anyone they thought was a threat to what their deep felt thinking of a perfect utopia, which means that they were in power, should be. This is why we should always fight that. This is why people should have freedom of speech, freedom to gather. I'll do all these things. This is freedom of thought, which is, of course, during the time of communists, was you really had to hide your thoughts. In the Inquisition in Spain and other parts of Europe, you could not express any thoughts. And the spirit realm, I tell you, the people who are trying to promote these type of things, this communists and then very radical socialist ideas, where you are told what to do and you're shunned if you don't toe the line, is not what the spirit world wishes. They wish to have an open dialogue and let all of us learn. And yes, that means stupid ideas can be thrown around the net sphere, and really dumb conspiracy ideas can be thrown about and talked about. But let people learn for themselves. And yes, there will be mistakes, but that's part of us being on this planet of atonement. As people get smarter, as they get more experience, and that doesn't mean just one life, that means they go through life after life, they will figure all this out. Let them make mistakes. You let your child make mistakes. Sometimes making a mistake is the best thing that can happen to you, because then you really learn that lesson. If someone tells you not to do anything, okay, it should not do it. But do you know it in the bottom of your heart? A lot of times, no. So it's good to make mistakes, and it's good to let other people make mistakes. They will learn. I'll carry on. Like a procession of spectres, I saw the wraiths of some of this man's many victims glide past him, maimed and crushed, torn and bleeding from their tortures. Pallid ghosts, wandering astral shades from which the souls had departed forever. But which yet clung around this man, unable to decay into the elements, while his magnetism attached them like a chain to him. The souls in all the higher elements had forever left those which were true astral shells, yet they possessed a certain amount of vitality. Only it was all drawn from this man, not from the released spirits who had once inhabited them. So, what's he talking about? So these aren't really living spirits who want revenge. What really is happening, and I think Franchezzo thinks that somehow they got vitality from the original spirits, but maybe have, but it was, and he's right. He says, only it was all drawn from this man, not from the released spirits. So in his own mind, he is replaying the victims, and he's creating these visions of these victims around him. So he feels bad about it, but is he doing anything about it yet? Because he's still in this cage. There were such things as ghosts are made of, which are seen haunting the spot where someone too good and innocent to be so chained to earth had been murdered. They seem to their murderers and others to live and haunt them. Yet the life of such astrals or ghosts is but a reflected one, and ceases as soon as remorse and repentance have sufficed to sever the tie that links them to their murderers. So again, he's pretty correct in this. And this is why Jesus, of course, said, forgive 70 times, 7 times. Is when you don't forgive, then you have spirits around who are obsessing over trying to get revenge or teach someone a lesson, where we should know that the spirit world, via karma, right, and multiple incarnations, will teach anybody what they need to know. You don't have to teach someone who wronged you what the right thing to do. That person will be taught their lesson. It may not be on your timeline and on and what you want and the severity of what you want, but it will be done. I'll carry on. Other spirits I saw haunting this man and taunting him with his own helplessness and their past sufferings. But these were very different looking. They were more solid in appearance and possessed the power and strength and intelligence wanting in those other misty looking shades. So these were actual spirits who hated this man and wanted revenge. So what they are doing by hating and wanting revenge, they are retarding their own progress. I'll carry on. These were spirits whose astral form still held the immortal spirit souls imprisoned in them, though they had been so crushed and tortured that only the fierce desire of revenge remained. These spirits were incessant in their endeavor to get at their former oppressor and tear him to pieces. And the icy cage seemed to be regarded by him as being as much as a protection from them as a prison for himself. One more clever than the rest he had constructed, a long, sharp pointed pole which he had thrust through the bars to prod at the man within, and wonderful was the activity displayed in trying to avoid its sharp point. Others had sharp, short javelins which they hurled through the bars at him. Others again squirted foul, slimy water, and at times the whole crowd would combine in trying to hurl themselves in mass upon the sheltering bars to break through, but in vain. The wretched man within, with whom long experience had taught the impregnability of this cage, would taunt them in return with a cold, crafty enjoyment of their fruitless efforts. So, unfortunately, you have these spirits who were just cruelly used, and and I don't blame them for being mad at this guy, but they have to let it go. And they're spending all their time, they're wasting hundreds of years trying to get back at this person instead of trying to improve themselves. And you'll see this. So another example, this one is, he created this one to protect himself against all these spirits. There are stories of a terrible slave master who cut out the tongue of this poor older slave. The slave master had raped his daughter. When he died, he went through this dark place, but then all the people he mistreated were just like torturing him and taunting him. And then finally, the slave that he had cut out his tongue came in there and said, look, okay, this is enough. Let me take you to a place where you can recover. He had forgiven him. And in fact, in a later life, the slave was the father of the slave master to help him start a new life, help him start something to become something better. Another reason, another example, I should say, of protecting a spirit who did wrong from the spirits who want revenge was Mussolini. There was a book by a person who was a kind of a student, a helper to Chico Xavier. And they one time went to this mental hospital and they saw this poor guy who could only walk backwards. He couldn't speak. He was in very physically bad shape. And he asked, well, who was this guy? And they said, well, that was Mussolini, the dictator, the fascist dictator of Italy during World War II. And, he was before. And he said, well, he's in this shape, not so much as punishment, but as for him to be kind of hidden so he can live another life, so he doesn't have all sorts of spirits around him trying to, get revenge. So they try to like disguise him in this poor body in this mental facility in Brazil. Now, another example is Hitler. Now, Hitler, who had done much trouble, and it's probably the same thing's going to happen to Stalin and Mao, is Hitler is not allowed to come back to Earth for 1,000 years. So he is off this planet. His spirit is long gone. And so I'm sure there's other ones like him, like Stalin and Mao, and the dictators of North Korea, Fidel Castro. These people will be sent somewhere for them to learn. And in time, they will become better people. In time, they will learn the errors of their ways. Just like you and I have. I have done horrible things. I've been told that I have tortured people. And I'm sure I went through some lives where I was severely disabled. And I'm sure I went through times where I had spirits that were just haunting me and taunting me for good reasons because of what I'd done to them. I don't feel that now. So hopefully they forgave me. God bless them all. We carry on. To my mental query as to whether this man was ever released, an answer was given to me by the majestic spirit whose voice I had heard at rare times speaking to me, and from the time when I heard it first at my own grave. That's probably his guardian angel. On various occasions when I'd asked for help or knowledge, the spirit had spoken to me, as now from a distance. Now, before I go from a distance, so guardian angel, to be effective with you, does not have to be like right next to you, even though you can't see your guardian angel, he or she or whatever. They don't have to be next to you. They are always connected to you. It's like you have a cell phone with an open line to their cell phone, and it rings at any time. You don't even have to dial. Is that you can ask for help, and if they're on another planet on the other side of the galaxy, they will immediately know that you've asked for something. And they'll also know if they query in this universal cloud database of what's going to happen in the future. They'll also know, like, oh, like an hour from now, this guy's going to be in real trouble. I might have to go to Earth and be there myself. So they will be part of helping you, and they will either be next to you if the moment it requires that, or they'll be far away, and they'll give you thoughts and answers. Guardian angels. In fact, the guardian angel stays with you even when you're in the spirit world. This one pretty high spirit, like I think the 10th level of heaven. He had never met his guardian angel. Then finally, when he was like on the borderland between the 10th and 11th level of heaven, he saw this guy on the other side of a canyon. And the guy came up to said, come over here. He says, well, I can't. And he goes, oh, you're my guardian angel. He goes, yes, I'll help you. So he made this bridge out of his own willpower. And he came over and they started talking. And the guy said, look, I've been with you forever. You've done many things right. You've done many things, not too good. And so again, I would like to tell everybody, if you ever had messages from spirits and, through a medium or whatever, and if it's all about flattery to you, it's not true. A higher spirit, the one who really cares about you, will tell you that, yeah, you've done this okay, but you got to improve on this. I mean, all the messages I've had, my wife and I've had from the spirit plane has always been, this will happen, but you've got to march in step, right? You have to do this. You need to work harder. One medium I knew, he was on a business trip, and he, after work, he kind of had a glass of wine. He goes, oh, I can finally rest and relax. And then his guardian angel said, no, you have to work all the time. And of course, that was kind of funny, but that's the humor. I mean, that is, you know, he had to work all, and he laughed too. He goes, "Yeah, okay." So don't don't trust if a spirit keeps praising you and telling you what a great person you are, and doesn't kind of give any like but, that means that that's not a high spirit helping you. I would be very careful on following any directions from that. So I will I'll carry on. On various occasions, oh yes, okay, as a distance now. His voice standing to me as the voice spoken of by the prophets of old, when they thought the Lord spoke to them in the thunder. This voice rang in my ears with its full, deep tones. Yet neither the imprisoned spirit nor those haunting him heard it. Their ears were deaf, so they could not hear, and their eyes blind, so that they could not see. And to me the voice said, Son, behold the thoughts of this man for one brief moment. See how he would use liberty were it his. So this is pretty exciting. And I saw, as one sees images and reflected in a mirror, the mind of this man. First, the thought that he could get free, and when once free, he could force himself back to earth in the earth plane. And once there, he could find some still in the flesh whose aspirations and ambitions were like his own. And through their help, he would forge a still stronger yoke, as of iron, to rivet upon men's necks, and found a still crueler tyranny, a still more pitiless inquisition, if that were possible, which should crush out the last remnant of liberty left to its oppressed victims. He knew he would sway a power far greater than his earthly power, since he would work with hands and brain freed from all earthly fetters, and he would be able to call up around him kindred spirits, fellow workers with souls as cold and cruel as his own. He seemed to revel in the thought of the fresh oppressions he could plan, and took pride to himself in the recollection that he had ever listened unmoved to the shrieks and groans and prayers of the victims he had tortured to death. From the love of oppression and for his own relentless ambition, he had worked, making the aggrandizement of his order but the pretext for his action, and in no single atom of his hard soul were there awakened one spark of pity or remorse. Such a man, set free to return to earth, would be a source of danger far more deadly than the most fierce wild beast, since his powers would be far less limited. He did not know that his vaunted Inquisition, which he still sought to strengthen in all its deadly powers, had become a thing of the past, swept away from the face of God's earth by a power far mightier than any he could wield, and that, like the dark and terrible age in which it had sprung up like noisome growth, it had gone nevermore to return, thank God, never again to disgrace humanity by the crimes committed in the name of him who came only to preach peace and love on earth, gone, with its traces and its scars left upon the human mind, in its shaken and broken trust in a God and in immortality. The recoil of that movement, which at last swept away the Inquisition, is yet felt on earth, and long years must pass before all which was good and pure and true, and had survived throughout even those dark ages, shall reassert its power, and lead men back to their faith in a God of love, not a God of horrors, as those oppressors painted him. And of course, the Inquisition has kind of receded, but there's still, now we have the fresh knowledge of the tortures and the secret police and the gulags by the Soviets, and before Russia became free, Chinese communists, where they still put people in gulags, and in North Korea, Cuba, and then of course here, and other places where now they have this strict wokeness, where they try and stop anybody from speaking. It's all, and they think, of course, that they morally can destroy your life and destroy everything about you because they are morally superior to you, and you're fighting what their understanding of perfection is, and therefore you're evil. Now, that is not the way we behave. Let people be misconstrued, try to educate them, be nice, but let them make mistakes. As I said before, the people who are doing this, the people who are trying to destroy people's lives because they do not toe their line, they will go to not nice places, unfortunately, and yet unless they kind of change their attitude and try to help people instead of trying to just hurt anyone who does not perfectly agree with what they want. Now that is not a good place to be, and it should not be what we do. That means we live, of course, that means we live in a less ordered and chaotic world, right? Because not everybody's on the same plane. That's the way it should be right now on this planet of atonement. But in the future, that will not be. The spirit world is starting to move us from a planet of atonement to a planet of regeneration, where love of God, love of each other, um, uh, communication with the spirit world will become more normal, and people will cast off the hate and greediness. And those who refuse to learn and look up to the light and improve themselves, they will be sent to other planets when they peacefully pass away from their physical incarnation. They won't be allowed to reincarnate on Earth as we become more and more a planet of regeneration. That's how the Earth will have good, decent people on it. It won't be perfect. There'll still be errors and stuff like that, but it won't be like it is now. That's what's waiting for us, and each of us has to play our part. From this frozen land, I turned away, chilled and saddened. I did not care to linger there or explore its secrets, though it may be that again at some future time I may visit it. I felt that there was nothing I could do in that land, none I could understand, and they but froze and revolted me without my doing them any good. So it's just like what Jesus said to his apostles. If you go through a town and no one cares, don't let the dust collect on your sandals. Just keep going. On my way back from the frozen land to the land of twilight, which is the lower zone, because that's where he's residing now, kind of a way station for people like him who haven't got into heaven, but they're trying. They're really good. They're trying their hardest. I passed a number of vast caverns called the caverns of slumber, wherein lay a great multitude of spirits in a state of complete stupor, unconscious of all around them. These, I learned, were the spirit of mortals who had killed themselves with opium eating and smoking, and whose spirits had thus been deprived of all chance of development, and so had retrograded instead of advancing and growing, just as a limb tied up and deprived of motion withers away, and now they were feebler than an unborn infant, and as little able to possess conscious life. So now, again, this is extremely sad, and they sleep because when they passed away, probably of some sort of opium overdose, or now in our modern world, probably mostly heroin overdose, which happens to many people, or whatever other drug. They their minds in this loop of where they died in this sleepy drowsiness, and I guess your mind is this powerful engine in the spirit world, and it thinks it's asleep and it's floating along, and there's no other stimuli because now your body's dead. Your body's not going to be affected by any external stimuli because it's decomposed. And again, the same thing happens sometimes to people who are very strenuously atheists, where they believe that when they die, they go to sleep and that's it. Now, those people are probably helped quicker because they will be brought and they'll have magnetic passes. Those who are good people, there's many great people who are atheists, and God bless them all. But I always tell them that think just a little bit of your mind that there may be more than just your physical existence, because they don't believe they're going to wake up, so they don't, and then there's have to be a lot of work by the spirit world to help them. Now these people he found in the caverns of slumber, they are really deep into it. In fact, this is what he says. In many cases, their sleep would last for centuries. In others, where the indulgence in the drug had been less, it might last only for 20, 50, or 100 years. These spirits lived, and that was all, their senses being little more developed than those of some fungus growth, which exists without one spark of intelligence. Yet in them the soul germ had lingered, imprisoned like a tiny seed in the wrapping of some Egyptian mummy, which, long as it may lie thus, is yet alive, and will in a kindly soil sprout forth at last. These caverns, in which the kind spirit's hands had laid them, were full of life-giving magnetism, and a number of attendant spirits who had themselves passed through a similar state from opium poisoning in their own lives. So this was written at the end of the of the 19th century. So opium was like, the opium dens were the big thing. Were engaged in giving what life they could pour into those comatose spirit bodies, which lay like rows of dead people all over the floor. So they're probably walking through and they're giving magnetic passes. By slow degrees, according as the spirit had been more or less injured by the drug taken in the earthly life, these wretched beings would awake to consciousness, and all the sufferings experienced by the opium eater when deprived of his deadly drug. Now, this is very true. The Spiritism tells us this. So if someone's on drug or an alcoholic or something like that, when they die, they still feel they need it. They don't, right? Their body doesn't need it, but that their body is now responds to their mind, right? Because they're more ethereal and they think they have a body, and therefore they think they're sick, they think they need alcohol, then they long for it and they feel weak and they feel terrible without whatever drug they need. And it's their mind that tells them this. It's not their actual physical body being addicted. And of course, when these people finally rise up and they go to these little protected care centers, they're taught like, no, this is in your mind. You don't need this. And they finally learn. By long and slow degrees, the poor spirits would awaken sense by sense, till at last feeble suffering children, they would become fit for instruction when they would be sent to institutions like your idiot asylums, where the dawning intellect would be trained and helped to develop, and those faculties recovered which had all been but destroyed in the earth life. These poor souls would only learn very slowly, because they had to try to learn now without the aid of their earthly life those lessons which it had been designed to teach. Like drunkards, only more completely, they had paralyzed brain and senses and had avoided, not learned, the lessons of the earthly life and its development of the spirit. And of course, that was, an excellent sentence. They avoided, not learned. And this happens to all of us at some point in time in our spiritual climbing, or actually not climbing, I should say, in our spiritual quest to improve, that some of us will go through life after life. They call it just parking. We'll live a life, but we won't really improve spiritually. We'll just kind of do the same dumb things we did before. And you can park in life after life and be the same, SOB or whatever, not nice person, selfish, materialist. Not sure I've done that, until finally, hopefully at some time, you'll wake up and the lesson will start dawning on you. And believe me, you'll have these lessons, right? You're on earth. You're going through a pre-packaged, a predetermined set of trials and episodes. Now, it doesn't mean it's complete determination that everything that's going to happen to you is foreseen. Because within these physical episodes, right, a car accident or a major illness or a job or a bad marriage, you have free will to act as honorably and as nice as you can to everyone else around you and to yourself. You also have the free will to be not a nice person to these people. So this is your freedom, is in how you react to the class you are assigned. To me, these caverns of slumber were inexpressibly sad to behold, not less so than those wretched slumberers were unconscious for so long of the valuable time they lost in their dreamless, hopeless sleep of stagnation. Like the hare in the fable, while they slept, others less swift won the race. And these poor souls might try in vain through countless ages to recover the time they had lost. When these slumbers shall at last awake, to what a fate they do not awaken, through what an awful path they may not climb to reach again. That point in the earth life from which they have fallen. Does it not fill our souls with horror to think that there are those on earth who live and pile up wealth through the profits made from that dreadful trade in opium, which not alone destroys the body, but would seem to destroy even more fatally the soul, till one would dependently ask if there indeed be hope for its victims? And of course, think about that. Those who live to make profits, so the drug dealers, the people that create cigarettes, the people who push alcohol. Don't be those people. If you work for one of these companies, try to find another job. Don't invest in these companies. The spirit world wants us to help each other. We're not helping each other by having people in bad situations. Now, I could be too broad in what I said, right? Because like there's wineries that, you know, people want to drink too much wine. That's their fault, right? But there's, you know, wine is part of our, it's healthy for us. So but be careful, and, you know, of what you do and who you associate with. These awful caves, those terrible stupefied spirits, can any words point a fate more fearful than theirs? To awaken at last with the intellects of idiots, to grow through hundreds of years, back at last to the possession of mental powers of children, not of grown men and women. Slow, slow must be their development even then, for unlike ordinary children, they have almost lost the power to grow and take many generations of time to learn what one generation on earth could have taught them. I've heard it said many of the unhappy beings, when they have attained at last to the development of infants, are sent back to earth to be reincarnated in an earthly body, that they may again enjoy the advantages they have misused before. But of this I only know by hearsay, and cannot give any opinion of my own upon its truth. I only know that I should be glad to think of any such possibility for them that could shorten the process of development or help them to regain all that they had lost. And the answer is yes, they are sent back, because they are so backwards that they need to be reincarnated. Now, they won't be reincarnated in any position of importance. They may be reincarnated in a very poor household, but they will be given, and they'll have lots of obstacles in their way. They won't have great wealth or opportunities unless they somehow make them themselves. But they're just here just to kind of regain their equilibrium and regain their intellectual faculties, not to be a shining star upon the earth. That's not going to be their destiny. That the spirit world is not going to allow that, because, you know, it'd be a waste of space that someone more important should occupy. So that is the end of chapter 9. So I hope people enjoyed that, and so I want to make sure I end this. Like, if you want to know more about Spiritism, on my blog, nwspiritism.com, and there's links below, is a PDF, Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. I also have a course in Kindle and paperback and in Audible format, but you can download it for free. And in fact, and then for the Spirits book, I have, of course, you can always find that in PDF. That's how I first found the Spirits book. But I also have that on my YouTube channel and on my blog in MP3 and MP3 something, in Audible type format. I forgot the designation of that, but it's an Audible format. I had to break it up in several files. It's so large, but you can. It's an Audible book. You can either do it through YouTube or my blog. If that's how you like to listen to things, I have every chapter recorded in the Spirits book. I didn't do the complete introduction, but I started from chapter 1. So, and then if you want to know more about the actual heaven and below, where it is, I recommend my book, Heaven and Below, Book 1 of Spiritism, The Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. That's for people. I would recommend you read the Spirits book first. You read my Spiritism 101. There's other books, of course, by Allan Kardec. But you read those, and then this will start giving you more and more detail. This is the fantastic part about Spiritism. In most other religions, we're kind of giving fuzziness of what's awaiting us when we cross over. They acknowledge that our soul is immortal, right? We won't perish. When we physically die, we're still there. But Spiritism says, hey, when you physically die, you are who you are. You don't turn into this benevolent angel, right? Too bad. But you are who you are, and your chance to improve. And of course, you come back and you improve over time. And it tells us about the processes, the levels of heaven, where you live, how you grow, how you educate yourself, the powers you have. All that gives you great detail. And of course, this is just book 1. I have a second book, Spirits and the Spirit Universe, and book 3, How We're Guided by Spirit. So it kind of gives you a complete survey of heaven and what's awaiting us, and how we're guided, and how the earth will become a better place. So before I end, please hit the like, hit the bell, hit the subscribe, and I want to say God bless to everyone. God bless.